Hello, my name is Matt Whitman. I enjoy grilling, cooking steak on a grill, hamburgers, hot dogs, things like that. I bought a grill a few years ago from Walmart. It's a large retailer here in our country. They sell all sorts of things, including grills. I bought it and I assembled it. It's super fancy. It's got like 4 burners on there. You can cook a lot of steak at once. And I could be accused of having a grill that stays a little bit on the dirtier side. Some might say, quote, filthy. I would say it's well seasoned. And every spring, once a year, whether it needs it or not, I clean that thing. And I got this metal scrapey thing, and I get all of the char and the seasoning off of the grill surface itself. And then I take a power washer, and I do this in the middle of just cleaning everything in the early season, on like the first nice warm day in the spring. And I open up this grill. And for the last, I think it's got to be 3 years, I have made the exact same mistake. I go in there and I just spray around. I blast out all of the goop and everything into the yard. But this grill has some goofy little angle where whenever I hit it at that angle inside the grilling area with my power washer, it just boomerangs all that slime into a slarm tornado and just blasts it right back in my face. And then I have to do the walk of shame back in the house covered in all of the leftover grilling material from the last 12 months of cooking steak, and dripping beef, fat, and things like that. I'm sure for some of you, that's like the worst thing you could ever imagine. For me, it doesn't actually sound that bad. I really like that red meat. Sometimes stuff boomerangs on you. You feel like you're in control of the situation, and then you realize that you applied the pressure at the wrong angle, and the thing comes right back on you. Here it comes. Likewise, in Matthew chapter 28, we see a scenario unfolding that spans back into chapter 27 where the religious leaders are like, all right, there's a rumor that this guy's going to come back to life, and we really, really want him to stay dead, not just literally. I mean, obviously everybody stays dead, right? But we want him to stay dead in terms of the legend. We can't have this thing growing into some sort of rumor or myth that gets out of control. We'll never be able to get that cat back in the bag, that toothpaste back in the tube. So they take preemptive measures before the burial is complete to make sure that they can control the narrative. And so in Matthew 27, the next day, this is after Joseph of Arimathea, and we learn from other Gospels, Nicodemus, another religious leader. This is after they take the body and prepare the body and bury the body and everything. But then the religious leaders find out about it, and they didn't get to call dibs on the body because they were busy doing religious things over the weekend. They can't go harvesting bodies when important religious festivals are happening. That doesn't work. You'd be unclean, so disadvantage them. Well, the next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I'll rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell people that he's been raised from the dead. This last deception be worse than the first. And Pilate, who at this point, I just imagine his clothes being tattered. He's got like a gray stress beard going on. He's got bags under his eyes. Things are not going well. There are much bigger problems back in Rome. Tiberius, the emperor, is like half paying attention, and he's ruling from the Isle of Capri. He's got a lot of ladies and gambling going on there. He's just indulging. He's not doing a very good job. This other guy who seems to be plotting insurrection or maybe even a coup to take things over. This other guy, alias Sejanus, who is Pilate's benefactor and kind of the only reason he has any title at all. It looks like he's getting ready to make his big play, or maybe he's just made his big play, depending on how you read these timelines. Pilate has got a bundle of stress, and that's before you even get into his household, where his wife was like, I don't like anything about this. You don't want to mess with this. Or his trusted centurion was like, yeah, I don't think you want anything to do with this guy at all. Like, I mean, he might actually be the son of God. Just move on. So Pilate is a beleaguered man under pressure from all angles, and he gets this weird request. He's like, I just want to be done with this stupid Jesus thing. Would you please quit bothering me with this? Oh my goodness, you people with your nagging. Yeah, fine, paraphrases mine. This part isn't a paraphrase. Take a guard, Pilate answered. Go make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went and did that. And that's the last we get from Pontius Pilate in the book of Matthew, just total resignation. Well, then we get all the resurrection stuff that you and I talked about the last few weeks in chapter 28. And then we jump over to the passage we were looking at yesterday in 28, starting in verse 11. While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. Think about what just occurred. The chief priests wanted to metaphorically clean the grill. We're going to tidy up this story. We're going to make everything clean and sparkly and neat, and it's going to work the way we want it to, the way they needed to clean the metaphorical grill here or prevent this horrible deception about Jesus being raised from the dead when they believe he wasn't, was to put reliable people there who are motivated by Roman law and their own skin. The Romans didn't mess around. They didn't conquer planet Earth by having an incredibly delicate military where they were very, very sensitive to excuses and understood that sometimes soldiers have a tough time. No, it was brutal. We have just mountains of documentation about what life in the legions was like, about what the training was like, about how these guys conducted themselves, about how hardened they became doing these massive tours that they did. These guys were not in for 4 years after high school. These guys were in for like all of adulthood, from the age of the late Republic during the Marian reforms and the age of Sulla before Julius Caesar, and then through Caesar and the early republics. We're talking like the 100 years leading up to the birth of Christ, and then in the early empire leading up to this time with Tiberius as emperor. These guys got pushed hard, and it created crises because they came back from years, not 4 years, like decades of hand-to-hand combat. In the trenches, hearing the sound of running other people through with spears and gladii. This was brutal combat that mercifully most of humanity in the modern age has never experienced. And I know people have experienced the horrors of war. I know there are people listening to this who have experienced the horrors of war. But hand-to-hand combat in the ancient world, I think that did something very unique and very forgotten to human beings. And we see echoes and shadows of that, not just in the way people write about that combat and write about who the soldiers became, but just in the political pressures that existed in Rome when these soldiers came back. And all they could functionally do was form this massive gang that rivaled the government there for decades. They couldn't get these veterans back under control. They got deprived of their property. Their wives and families moved on because they were in the field doing conquest for so long. And now they come back and they set up shop on, I don't remember exactly which hill. I think all those gangs set up shop on the Aventine. But the issue is, who are you going to send to police them? Like some new recruits? Well, let's send the high school boys out who just graduated and just got given their first spear. This should work. What are you going to do? Nobody could control them. What are you going to send the police with an edict from a judge? No one in Rome, where legions were not allowed to be, active legions couldn't be in Rome. Remember, you cross the Rubicon, you're declaring war against the city. So there was just nobody to stop them. And so we learn a lot about what life was like, what the expectations were like, what the demands were like, what degree of, tolerance, or rather complete and total intolerance for failure, desertion, dishonesty was permitted within these legions, and it was none. It was a highly disciplined war machine, the likes of which Earth had never seen. Maybe Sparta, maybe Persia at its height, momentarily wielded the kind of power that Rome was able to put on battlefields for centuries on end. That had a human cost. There was a culture that came with that. I'm coming back around to my point. Thank you for your patience with me. I get excited about history. The point is, these guards were part of that system, a system we know a ton about. The cost to them personally for going back to the religious leaders and being like, hey, so I know you told us to guard that tomb, but the cost to them is gigantic. So think about their actions. Why would they come to the religious leaders and give the report there instead of taking the report back over to the fortress that's next to the temple, the Antonia? Why wouldn't they communicate to Pilate or one of the centurions who they answer to? Well, the reason is because they'd be risking massive punishment. I got more I want to poke at with all of this business about the guards and their report and the way this is boomeranging back on them in the same way that my meat sludge grill cleaning boomerangs back on me when the point is just to get it clean and not put the meat sludge on me. So we're going to pick up right where we left off tomorrow. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.